Good afternoon, friends, and welcome to another edition of Speaker Circle. Joining me this evening is real estate professional and accomplished speaker, Mr. James Eugene. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. How's everybody doing?
Great. Just to give you all a little background of how James and I met, he is not only a fellow alum Gator, go Gators, he is also a part of Toastmasters, and we met at one of our leadership conferences. And his story was so captivating, and how he has just constantly overcome adversities and challenges to perfect his speaking and communication. So I thought he would be the perfect person to come on and share with all of you some of his real life stories and how you can also push through adversities. So, James, tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. Well, first and foremost, I want to thank Lisa. Ever since we met at that conference for Toastmasters, you know, you can tell that you were someone who was very, I guess, someone to know in the room, the way you commanded the stage, the way you presented yourself, and, not to mention, you know, us being the minorities in the room, it was easy to gravitate towards one another. So I would like to say thank you, one, for inviting me and for having me on here to share the small or the short bit of experience that I have thus far. But as far as somewhat about myself, I am a real estate professional, like you said. I manage a portfolio for a family office of about 200 residential and commercial properties, and I have been delving in the real estate market for a good 5-6 years now, and I'm finally getting my footing and getting things underway with that. But mostly, I am a very simple guy. I'm a UF graduate, as you mentioned, and I am a Toastmaster, and I'm a very, very introverted kind of person. So this being, yeah, yes, this being my first podcast, you are helping me step outside of my comfort zone and to get into the those fear platforms, so I
Yeah.
can shed that fear and expose myself more to the world some. And so that's a little bit of my background and not too much.
Nice, nice. So, share with everyone, what was one of your biggest challenges and fears when it came to public speaking or just communication in general? You having such a huge real estate portfolio that you're responsible for, I'm sure communication is all you do all day, every day, with all sorts of people from all different walks of life. So, what was the thing that you had to really conquer in life, and how did you overcome that?
Oh, for sure. Especially being in the space that I'm in, I probably meet different people on a daily basis by the bunches. So that is one thing for sure that I've had to learn to grasp and to, you know, be comfortable with. But
Mhm.
as far as what I've had to overcome, if you could not already tell, I do have a stammer. And so for me, growing up, having that stutter has been something that has always been that vulnerability that I wore on my sleeve. Some people, you can tell that they deal with different things that you could somewhat hide. But for me, my insecurities were, on a platter for the world to see. And so I had to become very comfortable with myself, because with a stammer, you can really tell that it can either make people really uncomfortable because they want to help you and, help you get your point across and things like that. But at the same time, they want to respect you and allow you to get it out. Right. So for me, I had to get comfortable with being able to slow down and to being able to get my point across. Growing up with that, it allowed me to view the world in a very different vantage point. And so I felt that I would always see things that others wouldn't see. One, more so because of my fear. You know, as opposed to speaking out and, being more vocal with certain things, I was more of the person who internalized things and therefore was able to see more or differences in a different perspective than those that were near me. And so dealing with that has helped me tremendously to deal with people, to become better inept at the unspoken
Mm.
language. So for me, I guess being comfortable with the speech part was just an added benefit.
That is powerful. When you said that, it made me think of people who have one sense, like a sense out of the five senses. Like if someone is blind, they're a lot more, they listen a lot more. And if someone is deaf, then they see things a lot more. And I never thought of it like when you have a communication challenge that you're working through. And as you said, it made you become a lot more introspective. The fact that you were a lot more in tune with others. And I'm sure that really helped with relationship building as well as emotional intelligence. I was I had the pleasure. Now I'm getting a little choked up. I had a pleasure of being on a call that my sister Lydia Washington. She's a phenomenal speaker, and she'll be on one of the weeks. But she talked about the the 6 blocks of communication, and one of them is suspending judgment. Now, with you having a stammer, did you feel like people judged you and thought you may not have been as intelligent? Because I will say to the world, you're probably one of the most intelligent people I've ever met. Some of the
Well,
things
thank you.
have said to me, I'm like, wow, I've never heard of that, or I've never thought of that. So I'm sure that comes a lot from you working through your adversities and challenges. Did you feel like it pushed you more to be smarter, be faster at other things?
Oh, undoubtedly. So for me, I tried to not judge very much,
Mm,
just because I know everyone comes from their own parts of life. We're all dealing with our own stuff. We
mm,
all have things, and, being human, that's just the fact of the matter. Right. But with that being said, you know, even as a kid, I, I, I kind of always felt that I was, I'm not going to say smarter, but that I can see things that others weren't seeing.
agree.
And because of that, I kind of felt like I had the upper hand sometimes, because the ugly truth is people do underestimate you. People do think, certain things, towards you just by hearing you speak or just by looking at you, right? So with the stammer, it was one of those things where I would somewhat get dismissed.
Mm,
And I guess, especially growing up as a kid. So I guess that fact by itself was a driver for me.
wow. Wow. So
You
the
know,
this was more motivation for you, like, okay, you think I can't do this, you think there's limitations. I'm going to exceed all of those.
oh, for sure.
Wow.
For sure. And I think like most of us, I love an underdog story. And what better underdog story than your own? Right. And so for me, it was more of, you think this, but you just wait and see. And I've taken that philosophy in life since then, since as a kid.
I I love that. And I think for those of you listening, if you do have some type of limitation, remember that. Like there's a whole concept called inverse paranoia. Jack
Yeah.
Jack Canfield, the principles, success principles. He
Mhm.
also the gentleman who wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul. He talks about when there's things that you're paranoid about or you are fears to invert them and look at it as it is a benefit for you instead of allowing that paranoia to keep you from your greatness. So I love the whole inverse paranoia. And another thing that you talked about, James, that really hit for me is listening. Listening is the key component of communication and effective communication. And I think a lot of people forget to listen because they speak more than they listen. With you having a stammer and having to kind of sit back and observe and listen, do you think that that really helped you to hone in on your listening skills? Are you able to pick up undertones from people a lot easier or what they may not say what they mean and may not mean what they say. Can you kind of figure those things out?
I I would say so. You know, I'm more of a read between the lines kind of guy. So for me, you know, most of what people are saying are in the words that they're not saying, right? Are in the things that they're not saying. And I've come to find that for mainly, you know, a majority of the people that I come in contact with. You know, I would say specifically women, but I don't want to get ragged on here. But but no, you have to learn to read between the lines, because a lot of people aren't comfortable with saying what's in their minds, or you know, what's truly on their hearts. So you have to somewhat decipher, you know, what is actually
Mhm.
being said, you know, especially when you're dealing on the professional scene. You know, if you've got tenants, or if you've got a boss, or em, employees that you need to, you know, get some type of message across, and you may not feel comfortable. And so you have to learn how to speak to people differently, because everyone has different methods of communicating. So you have to learn that, and by way of learning that, I think it makes you better in dealing with it yourself, or myself personally. And so yeah, I've always been one to listen to what the person isn't saying, as opposed to what they are saying, because I think you get a lot more from that than not.
Wow, and that is a powerful tool, especially in business when you're negotiating. And it's I work in sales and doing that in sales as well. Got that. Now let me ask you: did you do any formal speech therapy or things, or were you more like self-made? Like you really figured out, okay, how to pace yourself, how to figure how to power through your different adversities.
Yes. I would like to touch back on the first compliment before I touch this one. So, as far as the listening thing, you know, one thing that I have picked up in being in boardrooms and in being in rooms with very high powered individuals, um, one thing that you see is that those who are the alphas in the room, or you know, those who are the ones in power, what you realize is that they tend to let everyone else speak first. And so they tend to let everyone get their points on the table. They tend to allow people to share what they're feeling, and you know, and how they see things, because what I've learned and what I've taken away from them is more so they're trying to cultivate or come up with the best possible, you know, response or solution for whatever matters at hand. And the best way for you to do that is to get the vantage points of everyone else that's involved, or that may have an outside view. And so listening kind of gives you insight on so many different things, but it also shows, you know, that you're someone who respects those who you're dealing with, and you're someone who can sit back and take in information that allows you to produce the best outcome for whatever it is that you're trying to do. And so that is a very big point.
That is powerful. And I've heard in negotiation, the first one to speak is the first one that loses.
Oh, first one to lose, baby. First one to lose.
You gotta sit back and let to see what other people are thinking. And that is so important in speaking, period. When you're speaking
Sure.
with people, when you're having effective communication. So I love that point. And then back to how you powered through your adversities. Were you more self-made? Did you seek out professional help? Or how did you become such a phenomenal speaker?
Well, I'm gonna say both. You know, growing up, I was going through the ringer as far as, you know, the speech therapist through the public school system, and you know, one week they might show, the next week they might not, and you know, so that got kind of tiring, but that was never something that I opted out of, right? But at the same time, it wasn't very effective. You
Mm,
know, it was, sadly, it was typically someone coming in to do a job, and then once the clock hit 5 or however long we had, they were done, right? And the number one thing that I would hear is slow down, slow down, slow down. And I'm going to just give a pointer out there to whoever's listening who might deal with somebody who has a stammer, or who has that type of, I guess, speech impediment. I think that is one of the most frustrating things for somebody who stutters, to hear someone else tell them to slow down, albeit it's very good advice, because now at my older age, I realized that slowing down was one of the bigger keys. Because once you can slow down, it was like my mind was going a lot faster than what my mouth can keep up with. So for me, I would tell myself as a kid, I am slowing down. I am slowing down. But truth be told, I was always trying to go, 10,000 miles per minute or per second. And so slowing down, I think, was one of those points that I took from other people. But as I grew in age and I grew in understanding of myself, I realized that the slowing down method really works, because once you can take your time with something, and once you can, let your words marinate so that people can hear it and people can really connect with it, I felt that, or I realized that that helped my stutter a whole lot. And I'm someone who likes to just jump into the deep end. So for me, it's one of those things. It was the most difficult thing in my life, was speaking.
Right.
Something that you have to do every single day, and something that you have to engage with others with every day. That for me was difficult. And so I learned to do the hard things first, and
Was there,
always.
was there like a turning point or something that happened where you were like, you know what, I'm just going to face this fear? Was there an opportunity that you missed, or you were misunderstood gravely and you're like, I'm not letting this happen again? What was your pinnacle point?
My pinnacle point. That's a good. There were a few when I was a kid. So, I learned to fight very well as a kid. Because as we all know, kids can be very brutal.
So you're
So,
knuckle sandwiches if someone picked on you for your.
hey, these days they're shooting more, so I try not to get involved in all of that. But these work. Um, but no, repeat the question for me, because I completely.
You have like
Oh,
something,
the pinnacle moment.
the pinnacle
Sorry.
moment. I'm
Yes,
definitely going to work on this. I'm not going to let my voice not be heard.
for sure. So about, I want to say 6, 7 years ago, I I met this guy that I currently run his real estate for now. I met him about 6, 7 years ago, and a few days went by, and I was doing the whole shadow, learn under him kind of thing. And he took me into a very important meeting with a lot of bigwigs. And, of course, that's an environment that anybody would want to be involved in, or, be taken into. But I was so outside of my element
Wow.
that when it came time for me to introduce myself and to just say my name and who I'm here to represent and things of that sort, it probably was one of the most embarrassing experiences of
Wow.
my life. So for me, that was like, there has to be an end to it. There has to be a point where you truly gain control and you master this. Now, I don't think it's something that ever goes away completely, but
Got
you learn to control it. And I
wow.
think that one meeting, became that turning point for me, because it was, for me, it was enough is enough. I
That's
have to learn to control this, and I'm no longer a kid, so I have to learn. It's not seen as a cute thing, regardless of how many people tell you how cute it is. You know that in a professional setting, cute has no place for the most part. So you need to learn to man up. And that's what I did. I manned up.
Good, and you're doing it well. We do
Thank
have
you.
a question out there for you from Miss Kayla Rodriguez. Earlier, you made
Sure.
a point that telling someone with a stammer to slow down is frustrating. So Kayla has a question. What do you think would be a better option to tell someone rather than saying slow down? What's a good way where you can be there and supportive? And I think that's a great question, Kayla, because you don't want to offend the person, but you
Mhm.
want to offer some help. So what would you say is a good option?
Well, I think there are several, but I think what's important is you first, I guess, what you should do is first figure out what relationship you have with that
Mm,
person. I think that's a very important key, because if it's someone that you've known for years or you're comfortable with, the slow down might not hurt as much.
yeah.
They can probably take that in a bit easier than someone you've never ever met, or you've only met a few times or in passing. But if it's someone that you're very comfortable with, I would say, hey, you know take their hand. It's
Mm.
okay. We've got time. We're here.
Oh, that's nice.
That is one way, as opposed to saying slow down, slow
Yeah,
down. The slowdown gives you more of a bothered feel, whereas we've got time says, I'm here for you. We've got time. We can do whatever it is that we do, especially because they know that you have a stammer,
yeah,
right? Now that's the person who's close to you and who knows your ins and outs to a degree.
yeah.
Whereas someone you don't know, I think the best thing you do is you don't say anything.
Just
Sometimes sometimes silence is the best policy, especially for things like when someone dies, like, right, what do you say, right? And sometimes the best thing to just do is be there, right? And to be there with no judgment, because what I've learned, that language without words, facial expressions tell you a lot,
yes.
right? So you might be there, but your face is like, you can tell that you're struggling listening and you're struggling with the person.
Right.
So someone who stammers, I think they're very keen on all the other things. And
That is
yes,
a good
you
point.
have to be honest with,
Yeah.
with them, but if there's no need for the honesty, then at some point you just don't say anything and you
Yeah.
just respect them, and you continue on. But I
Yeah.
think just being there for the person and watching your facial expressions, and honestly, if you can get to the point where you're not very close to them, but you can say, hey, can we have a personal, you know one to one, heart to heart, and just say, hey, I notice
Yeah.
that you stutter or that you have a stammer. you know Ask them what the background is. Has it always been that way?
Mm.
When did it start, or are you comfortable with it? I think those simple questions can break the ice more than people even realize.
What is the clinical or the PC thing to call it? Is it called a stammer versus stuttering? Because
Both,
okay,
both,
you can say either one. Okay.
both.
Kayla has a follow up from her question. Thank you, Latif, for your comment. Kayla's question was for reference. I had a younger relative with a stammer growing up. The adults would always say, slow down. And I was too young to know what to say, so I didn't say anything. Not sure if that was the right thing. So she's asking if you do have someone that's in your family or closer to you, should you offer some type of suggestions, or is it frustrating enough to have a stammer that it's like the obvious thing? Like, I don't need you to tell me I have a stammer. I know I do. What is the best way to show up for someone? I know you said taking their hand and saying, hey, we have time, but is just being silent okay too?
I think just being silent is absolutely okay,
Mm,
especially if you don't know what to say. Chances are you shouldn't say a thing, because what most likely will come out of your mouth is not how you envisioned it,
yes.
right? And so if that is the case, but at the same time, you know, I think the best way to show up for someone that deals with this type of struggle is try to figure out if they're comfortable with themselves, or try to help them figure out,
Mm,
if they're comfortable with themselves. Because I think that for me was the biggest thing. I think that was the biggest helping factor, being comfortable with myself, and also realizing that every single human being you see and you cross paths with has a help sign on the top of their forehead.
absolutely.
And seriously, I think that helps in public speaking. I think that
Yeah.
helps in dealing with your insecurities. I think that helps with so much more than just, the superficial thing, because what you realize, and I think as a kid, especially with a kid with a stammer, you don't realize how the adults around you are just trying to figure it out
Yeah.
just as much as you are.
You're just trying to help. That goes back
Yeah,
to both suspending judgment that Dia Washington's on, with the blocks of dialogue. You have to suspend judgment when people are, and I know you said people underestimated you a lot because of the stammer. They thought that you weren't articulate or you weren't as intelligent as you are, and that's not the case. So I love what Derek said. He said another great conversation greatly needed on the subject of differences.
for
We
sure.
all are different. The unifying thing is everyone has to communicate. And even if you're not in a profession where you communicate on a daily basis, even with your own circle of love and influence, you have to communicate. So, when you're in a professional setting, oh, and Kayla wanted to tell you that this was very helpful. Thank you. Thank you, Kayla, for that
For
great,
sure. Thank you, Kayla.
that was phenomenal. Now, when you are in a personal setting, are there different settings, I guess, where your stammer was a lot more challenging to overcome when you were communicating, professional setting versus your personal life? Or if you were angry, was it more prevalent? Or how did you manage that with different environments?
Oh, so the environment and your emotional state has probably 50% to do with it.
Wow. Wow.
Okay. So at least for me, and I do want to point out there, I've done a lot of research in the whole stammer and stutter thing. There is no consensus on what causes stuttering.
Wow.
There
Okay.
is no scientific consensus on what causes it. And so you'll get a one professional tell you one thing and the other tell you something else. So everyone's just stabbing at it, right?
Wow.
And so as far as that, there's no one way to help people fix certain things. But for myself, what I've realized is when I'm overly excited, when I'm angry,
Hmm.
or I would say those are the two biggest things. Overly excited, the excitement of things. It's like things are gearing up so fast up there that this moves so much faster than this that it doesn't have time to translate
That
out
makes sense.
out here. Right, right. But also when I'm angry,
Mm,
because I'm so overcome by something outside of me that I lose control.
mm,
And I think that is the pointer there. When you're overcome by something outside of you,
gotcha.
right? That excitement, that fear, that lack of comfort, for me, being able to be comfortable and to find a comfort inside of myself was the biggest factor. I had to come to copes with who I was and who I was okay being to the world,
Yeah.
right? And so the different environments absolutely played a factor, but I think once I was able to get a grip on who I was, the environments no longer mattered.
Wow, that's powerful. Well, Telly, you've shared, so thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your story with us today.
For
Are there
sure.
any parting words that you have for people who are working through a stammer or extreme anxiety? Because I know there's some people, I met a young lady, she told me that she would get in front of people to speak publicly and would pass out because she was so anxious and had so much anxiety about talking in front of people. So if there is a few tips or one universal tip that you can give to somebody and not just slow down, what would you say is a good thing to do for them to overcome those adversities?
Well, as far as tips, what I would definitely recommend people to do is one, read as far as personal development. There are tips and tools scattered all around the personal development world that can help people in so many different ways beyond being comfortable speaking. But the other thing that I would recommend is that we learn to prepare ourselves, or that we focus on learning to prepare ourselves to interact with people or to engage in a different activity. And so there's one book that I kind of frequent regularly. It's by Brendan Bouchard, and it's The Habits of Highly Effective People, right? And in that book, he shares a lot of tactical things that we can all use and try and test and learn. But one that really stands out with me is mastering our transitions, right? As far as mastering our transitions and how that correlates with your speaking and being comfortable and whether you're dealing with a stammer or not, once you can master your transition, because you may have been involved in something that got your emotions going. You may have dealt with somebody who really pissed you off. You may have been in an environment where your adrenaline was going or was running through the roof. And all of that plays a part in how you speak and how your speaking um, is gathered by other people. So what I would recommend is to really master your transition before you get into the house from coming to work. Learn to release whatever it is that you are doing throughout the day just by thinking about it, and just seeing it go up in the air as just smoke dissolving, or seeing it being shed off of you. That way, when you get engaged or go into the next thing, you're not bringing in all of the other stuff that can affect your emotions and that could affect your environment into your next thing. And I think that helps leaps and bounds with more than just speaking, but in everyday life, mastering those transitions.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
And the other tip that I would recommend is that we try to see people as those that need help. I
Mm,
think that one simple thing, when you stop looking at people as those who have made it or those who are somewhere you want to be, and as this special person or this other worldly type of person, I think that's when we make things or make obstacles for ourselves. And learning to really decipher that every human being, if you are human and you are a being, you are dealing with something. And so, with that understanding that everyone is dealing with their own crap, that allows you to be a lot less strenuous on yourself. So those are two tips that I would absolutely recommend. Master your transitions to be able to effectively communicate, and two, realize that we're all here trying to figure it out.
yeah.
Every last one of us. So
Great. Well, James, I tell you, thank you so much. I am so inspired by all the things you've overcome. Thank you for the difference you make to everyone in your circle, as far as all the people that you deal with, and having the courage to step out and to constantly grow. I know you're a big proponent of growth mindset and
for sure.
changing and things. So thank you for your time and sharing with us. And I want to thank everyone who was watching us today live. Next week, we will have Wantes Davis. She is a manifestation coach. So please join in for that. And please follow James. He's on all social medias, on Facebook and on Instagram as well. And look for big things from him too, very soon.
For sure. And I would love to thank you, Lisa, for having me and for allowing me to just share my story. Sometimes I get caught up in my day to day that I live in my own bubble, but you bring me out and allowing me to share, something that could possibly help someone else that may be dealing with it, I think is a very valuable thing. And I would love to thank you for that. And I actually have one more thing that I would like to leave, you know, the audience with, I would highly suggest that we try to figure out what it is that we're here to do, or why it is that we're here, because I think that was the other thing that helped me out tremendously, and is still helping me out, being able to decipher who I was and what it was I wanted to stand for. So I came up with 3 words that I have decided to live by since, those 6 years ago when I decided to really take this seriously. I came up with 3 words that I wanted to live by. And I think before I do anything, before I start my day, before I go to sleep, I try to evaluate my life, my day, my time off of those 3 words. And for me, those 3 words are being courteous, be poised, and be effective. And for me, being able to measure up everything that I do against those 3 words has helped my growth leaps and bounds. And so find your 3 words and get to it.
Love it. So being courteous, being poised, and being effective. And
For
that's
sure.
you accomplished them all on this call today.
Thank you so much.
Very poised, and this was really effective. So thank you again, James. And thank you all for tuning into Speaker Circle. Let's continue to grow together.
Thank you, Lisa.